In the middle of the Indian Ocean, there is a place so remote and so surreal that it feels like a lost world. This is Christmas Island, a tiny volcanic outcrop that is home to one of the most spectacular natural events on our planet, the migration of the red crabs. Every year, 50 million of these bright crimson creatures emerge from the jungle to march toward the sea in a waving carpet of red that covers roads, bridges, and gardens. But recently, this paradise faced a biological apocalypse. An invading army of yellow crazy ants began swarming the island, creating massive super colonies that were overwhelming the crabs by the millions. These ants don't have stingers. Instead, they spray a blinding acid that stops the crabs in their tracks, turning the jungle floor into a place of absolute devastation. For years, scientists fought a losing battle with chemicals, fearing the island's unique ecosystem was doomed. But then, they discovered a tiny unlikely hero, an insect so specialized and so targeted that it was able to dismantle the ant empire from the inside out. Today we are going deep into the heart of Crab Island to witness the most daring biological control project in history, where a microscopic wasp became the final hope for 50 million crabs. To understand the scale of this crisis, you first have to understand the red crabs. They are the keystone species of Christmas Island. They are the forest janitors, eating the leaf litter and keeping the jungle floor clean. Without them, the entire forest architecture would collapse. The yellow crazy ants, an invasive species from Southeast Asia, began to spread like wildfire. They didn't just build small nests, they built super colonies. In these areas, the density of ants reached thousands per square meter. When the crabs started their annual march, they had to walk directly through these ant-infested zones. The ants, sensing a threat or simply a source of moisture, would swarm the crabs, spraying formic acid into their eyes and joints. The crabs, blinded and unable to move, stood no chance. In just a few years, researchers estimated that the ants had eliminated over 15 million crabs. The impact was immediate and terrifying. In the areas where the crabs were gone, the jungle began to change. The leaf litter piled up, the soil became compacted, and new plant species that the crabs used to eat began to choke out the native trees. It was a trophic cascade in real time. The island's biodiversity was being flattened by an insect only a few millimeters long. Scientists tried everything. They used helicopters to drop poison bait across the island. It worked temporarily, but it was expensive, labor-intensive, and it wasn't a permanent solution. The ants always came back, and the constant use of chemicals was something no one wanted to maintain forever. They needed a biological reset. They began looking at why these ants were so successful on Christmas Island compared to their home turf. The answer was a mutualistic relationship that sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. The yellow crazy ants were being fueled by another insect called the yellow lac scale. These tiny stationary bugs live on the trees and suck the sap out of the leaves. They didn't have to attack the ants directly. They had to cut off their fuel supply. They had to target the scale insects. But how do you eliminate a scale insect across a rugged, tropical island without using massive amounts of pesticides? They turned to nature's most precise tactical weapon, the parasitoid wasp. Specifically, a tiny wasp from Malaysia called Tashardia fagus somervilli. This wasp is so small you can barely see it with the naked eye. But for the scale insect, it is a living nightmare. The wasp lays its eggs inside the scale insect. The larvae consume the scale from the inside, effectively ending its ability to produce honeydew or reproduce. This was the birth of the Christmas Island Wasp Project, one of the most carefully planned nature projects in history. You can't just release a new insect onto an island and hope for the best. That is how you end up with even bigger problems. For years, researchers at La Trobe University in Melbourne conducted rigorous tests in high-security labs. They had to be absolutely sure that this wasp-protein would only target the yellow lac scale and nothing else. They tested it against native insects, butterflies, and other scale species. Only after they were 100% certain that the wasp was a specialist operator did they get the green light for the release. The release process itself was an incredible feat of logistical planning. Biologists had to transport live wasps from the labs in Australia to the remote Christmas Island. They used small vials and timed the flights perfectly to ensure the wasps arrived healthy and ready to work. Once on the island, they identified the ant hotspots, the areas where the supercolonies were the most dense and the crabs were under the most pressure. They hung small boxes in the trees, each containing hundreds of wasps, and let them loose into the canopy. The results were not instant, but they were profound. Slowly but surely, the wasps began to spread through the jungle. As they moved, the population of scale insects began to drop. The honeydew river started to dry up. The yellow crazy ants, suddenly lacking their high-energy fuel, couldn't maintain their massive numbers. Their super colonies began to fragment. The ant density dropped by over 90% in some of the most heavily infested areas. For the first time in 2 decades, the red crabs had a clear path to the sea. Witnessing the recovery of the jungle was what shifted the project from a scientific experiment to a monumental success. In the areas where the wasps had done their work, the red carpet of crabs returned. The jungle floor was once again cleaned of leaf litter. The native trees began to breathe again. It was as if a dark cloud had been lifted from the island. But the story doesn't end with a simple victory. Nature is complex, and the scientists had to monitor how the rest of the ecosystem would react to the sudden decline of the ants. One of the most interesting things they found was that the wasps didn't wipe out the scale insects entirely. They reached an equilibrium. This is the hallmark of a successful biological control project. You don't want to create another extinction. You want to restore a balance. Now the wasps and the scale insects exist in small, manageable numbers, and because the scale insect population is low, the ants can no longer form the devastating super colonies that were overwhelming the crabs. The crab island was finally living up to its name again. The project also had an unexpected benefit for the island's birds. The yellow crazy ants were known to swarm the nests of ground-nesting birds, often resulting in the loss of chicks. With the ant populations under control, the bird populations began to rebound as well. The entire food web of Christmas Island was being repaired by an insect no bigger than a grain of sand. This is the power of targeted nature projects. Instead of using a sledgehammer like broad-spectrum pesticides, you use a scalpel like a host-specific wasp. But why was this project so hidden from the mainstream news? It's because biological control has a bit of a PR problem. People still remember the disasters of the past, like the introduction of cane toads in Australia, which went horribly wrong and caused massive environmental damage. Many people are terrified of the idea of introducing one bug to eat another. However, the Christmas Island project proves that modern science has learned its lessons. The level of testing and site-specific research that goes into these projects today is staggering. It is a high-stakes game of biological chess. And on Christmas Island, the humans and the wasps just won. The success on Christmas Island is now being used as a blueprint for other islands around the world facing similar invasive species threats. From the Galapagos to the remote islands of the Pacific, the Christmas Island model of sapsucker ant-wasp management is being studied with intense interest. It shows that we have the tools to save biodiversity, even in the most remote corners of the globe, if we are willing to invest in long-term, specialized research. The project team, led by park rangers and international scientists, continues to monitor the island. They use GPS mapping and remote sensors to track the health of the crab populations. Every year during the migration, they count the number of crabs crossing the roads. The numbers are climbing back to their historical peaks. Seeing millions of red crabs safely reaching the ocean to release their eggs is more than just a beautiful sight. It is a sign that the island has been saved from the brink of a total ecological collapse. There were moments during the ant invasion when it truly looked like the red crab might become an endangered species. The speed at which the ants were overwhelming them was faster than anyone could have predicted. There were fields of silence in the jungle, where you could once hear the rustling of thousands of crabs, but after the ants arrived there was nothing but the heat and the stillness. To see those same fields now filled with the sound of scuttling claws is a testament to the resilience of nature when given a helping hand. The yellow crazy ants are still on the island, of course. They always will be. But they are no longer the unstoppable force they once were. They have been relegated to a minor role in the ecosystem, held in check by the invisible presence of the wasps in the canopy above. This is the beauty of biological balance. It isn't about winning a war, it is about ending the conflict and allowing the native residents to thrive once again. The red crabs of Christmas Island are a world treasure. Their migration is one of the great wonders of the natural world, similar to the wildebeest migration in the Serengeti. Protecting them required a monumental effort that spanned decades and involved teams from across the globe. It serves as a reminder that we are the stewards of these unique places. When we accidentally introduce a predator like the yellow crazy ant, we have a responsibility to find a way to fix the damage. The insect that wiped out the ants is a hero of the small world. It reminds us that big problems often have microscopic solutions. For the people of Christmas Island and the 50 million crabs that call it home, the Tachyardiophagus wasp is the savior they never knew they had. It is a story of patience, precision, and the incredible complexity of the natural world. As the sun sets over the Indian Ocean and the first rains of the season begin to fall, the red crabs begin their march. They move with an ancient instinct, unafraid of the jungle floor. The wasps are high above, the scale insects are in check, and the ants are no longer swarming. The island is at peace. This is the result of what happens when we use our knowledge not to dominate nature, but to restore it. The story of Crab Island is a beacon of hope for conservationists everywhere. It proves that even when the situation looks dire, even when million-strong armies of invaders are overwhelming our icons, there is a way back. It requires science, it requires bravery, and it requires a deep respect for the intricate relationships that hold our world together. The Red March continues, stronger than ever, a crimson tide of life returning to the sea. All thanks to a tiny wasp and a team of humans who refuse to give up on a little island in the middle of the ocean. One of the most fascinating aspects of the project was the social behavior of the ants during the decline. Researchers noticed that as the honeydew became scarce, the ants became more aggressive toward each other. The super colonies, which are characterized by a lack of internal aggression, began to break down into smaller competing groups. This internal conflict further accelerated the decline of the ant population. The wasp hadn't just reduced their numbers, it had broken their social contract. Without the abundance of sugar to share, the crazy cooperative behavior of the ants vanished. The biologists also had to manage the aphid factor. In some parts of the island, other sap-sucking insects like aphids also provided some food for the ants. However, without the massive volumes of sugar provided by the lax scale, these secondary sources weren't enough to sustain the super colonies. The wasps had truly targeted the keystone of the ants' success. This level of ecological targeting is why the project is considered so brilliant. They didn't have to remove every food source, just the one that allowed the population to explode beyond its natural limits. What researchers found next was that the native vegetation began to recover at a staggering rate. The yellow lax scale wasn't just fueling the ants. It was also damaging the host trees by sucking out their nutrients and promoting the growth of sooty mold on the honeydew-covered leaves. This mold blocked photosynthesis, weakening the trees further. Once the wasps reduced the scale population, the trees regained their health. The mold disappeared, and the jungle became more vibrant and productive. The benefit of the wasp release rippled through every level of the forest, from the smallest leaf to the largest crab. The Christmas Island project is also a lesson in international cooperation. Funding and expertise came from the Australian government, universities, and various environmental NGOs. It shows that protecting a remote island's biodiversity is a global responsibility. When we lose a species like the Christmas Island red crab, we lose a part of the planet's heritage. The success of the wasp release is a win for everyone who cares about the natural world. But let's talk about the wasps themselves for a second. These are not the yellow jackets you see at a picnic. These are non-stinging parasitoid wasps. They don't care about humans, and they don't care about our food. They have one mission, and one mission only, to find a yellow lax scale insect. This specificity is what makes them such perfect candidates for biological control. They are like a biological smart bomb, programmed to hit one target and then disappear. If the scale insects were to vanish totally, the wasps would also go away, as they would have no way to reproduce. This built-in off switch is another reason why modern biological control is so much safer than the old methods. We are no longer introducing generalist predators like cats or mongooses that will eat anything they can catch. We are introducing specialists that are part of the original checks and balances of the target species' home environment. By bringing the wasp to Christmas Island, the scientists were simply reuniting a predator and prey that had evolved together in Malaysia for millions of years. The local community on Christmas Island played a vital role in the project as well. Residents helped monitor the ant populations in their backyards and gardens. They became the eyes on the ground for the biologists, reporting new ant sightings, and helping to spread awareness about the importance of protecting the crabs. The project turned the whole island into a giant open-air laboratory where everyone was invested in the outcome. They survived the arrival of humans, the clearing of land for phosphate mining, and now the invasion of the crazy ants. Their ability to bounce back when given the chance is incredible. It shows that nature doesn't need us to save it in the sense of doing all the work. It just needs us to stop the pressures we've introduced so it can save itself. As we look toward the future, the challenge of invasive species is only going to grow. With global travel and trade, new insects, plants, and animals are being moved around the world at an unprecedented pace. The Christmas Island model provides a way forward. It tells us that we don't have to accept the new normal of a degraded, ant-infested jungle. We can use the power of biology to fight back. What happened on Christmas Island wasn't just a win for the crabs. It was a win for the idea that we can be a positive force in the environment. We often hear about all the ways humans are destroying the planet, but we rarely hear about the thousands of people working tirelessly on projects like this to fix what has been broken. The wasp and the crab are proof that when we apply our intelligence and our resources to conservation, we can achieve miracles. The yellow ants were once the masters of the island. They ruled with an iron fist, or rather an acid spray. They had no natural enemies, and an endless supply of sugar. They were an unstoppable force, invisible wasp that they didn't even know existed. It is a classic David and Goliath story, played out under the tropical sun of the Indian Ocean. Researchers are now looking at the genetics of cooperation in the yellow crazy ants to see if they can find even more ways to disrupt their colonies. The more we understand the secret of their success, the better we can fight them. But for now, the Tachardia fegus wasp is doing a spectacular job. The balance has been restored and the crimson tide of red crabs is once again the dominant feature of Christmas Island. The project is a reminder that we should never underestimate the power of the small world. The insects and microorganisms that we often ignore are the ones that actually run the planet. When they go out of balance, the consequences are massive. But when they are in balance, everything else thrives. The red crabs are the visible beneficiaries of a microscopic harmony that has been painstakingly restored. The next time you see a photo of the Christmas Island red crab migration, look closely at the forest in the background. Know that the green leaves are healthy, because a tiny wasp is patrolling them. Know that the soil is clean because the crabs are free to do their work. And know that the ants are there too. But they are no longer the villains of the story. They are just another part of a complex, beautiful, and now thriving ecosystem. The Christmas Island Wasp Project is a story of hope. It is a story that tells us we can make a difference. It shows that with patience, science, and a lot of passion, we can turn back the tide of extinction. The Crab Island lives on, a vibrant red and green jewel in the Indian Ocean, saved by the smallest of heroes. The migration continues. The crabs are marching. The sea is waiting. And the world is a little bit better because a group of humans and a tiny wasp decided that 50 million crabs were worth saving. This is the truth of Christmas Island. It is a place where miracles happen, provided we are willing to work for them. The Yellow Ant Empire has fallen, and the Crimson Kingdom has been restored. The crabs of Christmas Island are back, and they are here to stay. The successful management of yellow crazy ants has also allowed for the reintroduction of other species to the island. For example, some species of native lizards that had almost vanished are now being seen more frequently. The ripple effect of removing the ant pressure is touching every single corner of the island's biodiversity. It's not just a crab story. It's a total island restoration story. The biologists are also using the data from Christmas Island to help the nearby Cocos-Keeling Islands, which are also facing ant invasions. The knowledge gained on Crab Island is becoming a vital resource for island conservation globally. This is the ultimate nature project legacy, a solution that can be shared, adapted, and used to save other paradises before they are lost forever. In the quiet of the Christmas Island jungle, if you listen closely, you can hear the sound of 50 million crabs. It's a rustling, a clicking, a movement that signifies a healthy, living forest. And somewhere up in the canopy, a tiny wasp is finishing its work, ensuring that the sound continues for generations to come. The crisis is over, the lesson has been learned, and the red crabs are home to stay. The yellow crazy ants were wiped out by a hero that no one saw coming, and the island is better for it. Stay curious, stay informed, and never forget the power of the small to change the big. Christmas Island is a survivor, and its story is one we should all remember.